Kahala. You can't sit still. You're so nervous. You're not be Yushav Hadas. You're not calm. You just stay put. He's Yatsev. U're'u es Yeshuas Hashem. You're going to see that Hashem is going to help you. Being able to see Hashem is another arrow. If we can't see the hand of Hashem in something, right, then we're in trouble. We don't see Hashgacha Pratis. The failure to identify Hashgacha Pratis is another arrow, a poison arrow. Yeah, it's like a blindness. Asher yaseh lachem hayoim. To believe that actually Hashem can bring you a Yeshua right now. There's nothing holding Hashem back. To have emunah, he says, Hashem could help us, but it's too late. It's too late. Right? Yush, it's too late. It's never too late. Yush is one of the big arrows of the Yetzer Hara, of Paro. And then you'll say, well, even if Hashem saves us today, but what about tomorrow? So worry. Worry is another one of the arrows. So Hashem says, no. Asher re'itim es Mitzrayim hayom, lo tosifu lirosam. You're not going to see them ever again. Ad olam, forever and ever. So not to be worried about the future. And when you say, but I'm not strong enough, I'm lacking myself, so it's feeling of inadequacy, feeling of inability to cope. Adonai yilachem lachem, Hashem will do the fighting for you. V'atem tacharishun, you don't even have to daven. Sometimes you have to take action. Get out from behind the sitter and go do something. Right? We're not only going to pray our way to Mashiach, we're going to have to actually take Masa. We're going to have to demonstrate our actions, demonstrate our emunah with taking action. Okay. So these were the 4 answers to the people. Those of them that said, well, let's kill ourselves. He says, just relax. Don't be so anxious. Don't kill yourself. Don't be so depressed. Don't be so anxious. And for those who said, let's negotiate. Let's just surrender. He says, no, lo sosifon lirosam odolam. You're not going to go see Mitzrayim anymore. There's no need to surrender to them. For those who said, let's fight, he said, Hashem yilachem lachem. Hashem is going to fight for you. It's not your job. You don't think you have to win the battle yourself, or only yourself. V'atem tacharishon, and now is not the time to daven either. Don't be afraid to take action of confidence. There's emunah, there's bitachon. Emunah is you believe. Yeah, emunah is tefillah. Emunah is tefillah. But then bitachon. Translate the emunah into tefillah. Don't leave it at davening and then chicken out for the rest. Right? Okay. So these are some of the poison arrows. How do you get rid of the poison arrows? And there's through shira. Okay? So I do want to go into this, and we'll leave it next time, because next time will be the week after Shabbos Shira. So we'll go into the 10 arrows, the 10 poison arrows. But suffice it to say, we had enough of introduction today that we understand what some of the arrows are. Fear, anxiety, feeling of inadequacy, what we call lack of self-esteem, worry about the future, lack of despair, Yush, thinking that nothing can happen and the time has run out, and there's no ability to have a quick turnaround. And all of those things lead us to remain in the captivity to whatever extent of Paro and his arrows. Okay. Now there's always Moshe. So Moshe represents those great people who have broken through. And I did want to mention a little bit about the Baba Sali, who was certainly such a person, and whose life broke through many barriers. And he lived a miraculous life. You would say there were Eser Nisim al Hayam and Eser in Mitzrayim. Well, his whole life was a life of miracles, and he didn't die that long ago. It was only 1984. One story that I heard when I was in yeshiva was that robbers, this was I told by a Sephardic Bacher who I went to yeshiva with, and there was hundreds and hundreds of stories of miraculous things. As robbers, the Moroccans, were very affected by the Paro around them. Moroccans are just generally tough country, very tough country. So some of the midos sunk into the Jewish people. And one particular issue is a crime. Theft. It's an issue. People want what other people have. So there were some people who came into the Baba Sali's home, and they started to collect whatever there was to collect, putting it in a sack, and they're ready to make out with their loot. They can't find the door. They're looking for a window. They can't find a window. And they're panicking. And all of a sudden they see the Baba Sali coming down, the stairs, and they just drop everything. And right away they see the door, and they're out the door. That was a typical story. In other words, the parameters of time and space, which is really what the limits of this world are. And that's what causes arrows to have effectiveness. Time, you run out of time. Space, you're constricted. You don't have the ability to do what you want. Makom and Zman are both the prisons of this world, but also the Bechira of the world. That if we can choose to understand them for what they are and work within them. Like that's why he says, HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chadashim. Time doesn't make life meaningless, it makes it meaningful. It's not just, an Eved has no mitzvos of time, right? Mitzvah shezman grama. Because they can't control their time as much as they would like, because their time is not their own. Their responsibilities are to others, right? So, but we can overcome those mitzvos. Say for women also, women are not obligated in mitzvos that have to do with zman because they have too much on their plate. They're taking care of an infant, or taking care of a person, or preparing, or whatever it is that generally falls in that category, although today it's changed, especially with microwaves, and diapers, and ready-made food, and so on. But if they want to step into a mitzvah that's time-based, God bless them. And when do they do that the most? Night of the Seder, right? With the 4 cups of the Geula, right? That's a Zman Grama. And yet, Nashim are an integral part of it because Nashim created the Geula. So you see, time is not a restriction that cannot be overcome. We are now. So one story about not being afraid. So the Baba Sali it's a long history, but he was born in Morocco. He came to live in Eretz Yisrael. He really wanted to be in Israel. His grandfather was the great Abir Yaacov that we spoke about, whose Schwartz said the previous week. But he wanted to be in Israel, and he came to Israel in the 20s, and he tried to hide out and become just a nistar, and he wasn't really, he was discovered pretty quickly. At some point, he was even offered to be the chief Sephardic rabbi, and he ran away for 10 years to France because he did not want to be a public person. Although he was a completely public person, he didn't want to be in the employ of the government because he didn't want to be restricted by whatever restrictions that by virtue of them paying him or giving him this kavod, that he would feel restricted by them. He didn't want any part of that. He was called back to Morocco because his brother was murdered in 1920 by one of the wicked, his name was Mulay Muhammad, who was terrorizing the Jewish community, murdered his brother, and he was forced to come back and head the community. And he was there during the Second World War period in which France was conquered by Germany, right? And then what was the French puppet republic called? Vichy France. And Vichy France, which was a Nazi collaborative government, right? That's where they sent all the Jews out to Drancy and to Paris, Babich Rabbi miraculously escaped at that time from Paris, actually. But, they controlled Morocco because they had conquered Morocco during World War I period, even before. So the Nazis sent their Vichy France counterparts to rule over Morocco along with the local, they didn't take away the local Arabic leaders because otherwise the people would completely rebel. But they put their officers as, charged. So one of these officers was particularly unwilling to let the Jews daven because it disturbed his sleep. Because the Baba Sali's shul was right next door. Now, Sephardim, they do the whole month of Elul. They don't, and they're up at Chatzos, and they're doing, they have the Nigunim, and they have just the Shiurim and Tishbachos. many. I have a beautiful siddur of all the compositions of the various rabbis from the Abba Chatzera clan. They all wrote them like acrostics with their name, Like Yaacov would be Yud, and then a paragraph that starts with Ayin. Beautiful. Mostly about giving it to the enemies, mostly, so they have to deal with a lot. So this guy says, no davening, and if you daven, I will kill you all. Can you imagine? No slichos. So the Baba Sali requested an appointment, and he saw him, and he came late. No. There's two different stories. The first story was, he said, don't worry about this guy. He's just going to die. So Baba Sali conveniently went to Algeria, and the next day after he made this decree that he's going to kill anybody who does slichos, his wife finds him half dead on the couch. She goes running to the Baba Sali's house. Of course, he went to Algeria, so he's not there, and he dies. That's story number one. Story number two is that they also had a Vichy French guy who was a devout anti-Semitic Catholic. And when he came into town, he was horrible to the Jews. And the Baba Sali came in to complain. And Baba Sali was half an hour late to that appointment, which he was trying to, work out the problems. So the guy says to him, you're half an hour late, and then he starts cursing out the Jewish people for killing Yashka and all those things. And so Baba Sali said to him, he was a Jewish person who was killed by the Sanhedrin, and you shouldn't interfere with internal Jewish matters. That's what he told him. And of course that sent him even more ballistic, and the Baba Sali actually reached out and slapped him. The guy drew out his pistol because he was embarrassed in front of his own family and I guess his own officers. And the Baba Sali just kept giving it to him, about how wicked he is and how he says to him, I see that you're not ruling out of justice, but you're ruling out of hatred. As if that's really giving it to somebody. It was the truth, but he was yelling at him. And then all of a sudden he drops the pistol and he pleads for forgiveness. And he says, if you were willing to die, I could have just shot you. And you were willing to die to protect these people. He had imprisoned some of the leaders and he was terrifying them. He says, Baba Sali says, I'll forgive you. You got to let everybody free. And you got to cease and desist with all these, your campaign. And so it was. This was the Moshe's in the face of the persecutions of Paro. That's what they had a miraculous way. And they said that he used to let people know that he knew everything, only to increase their emunah. Vayaminu b'Hashem u'b'Moshe avdo. Moshe is Eved Hashem because he can do things that only Hashem can do. Miraculous things. You understand? If you have a belief in the Moshe that he's Eved Hashem, that'll increase your emunah in Hashem altogether. So when people used to come to his house in Netivot, he used to tell them everything about their family and about their history. He never met them before. And they asked him, why did you do that? He says, because I want them to have faith in what I'm going to do. There's a lot of times when people came with sickness, he would just give them like water from his house. He says, it's not that the water is doing anything, but the fact that they need something to believe in. And then, so just to conclude our story for today, he would go around like this. He wore, out of tzniut, he would wear a head covering, right? Or maybe because of the sand also, but I think mostly out of tzniut. Like this, right? That's what he used to look like, right? And so when it came a day, you can see here, right, that he had a lot of guests, this is what he did. He takes off his scarf, and he covers over the bottle of Mahaya, and he sees he's got 1,000 people there, and he just starts pouring, and nobody can understand how out of this little bottle came 1,000 shots. We'll do a live demonstration momentarily. But, and they asked him, like, what happened? He goes, what happened with the Machia happened. Whatever happened, happened. You understand? He had a koach that was completely lamala. And they said, his grandson said that in the Tivot, it's pretty hot in the Tivot. Because they never had a refrigerator. In the early years, they didn't have a refrigerator. They got later. They got close to 1980. They did get a refrigerator. I'm talking about in the 50s. He came in 64 back to Eretz Yisrael from Morocco. 64. And in 64, not everybody in Israel had a refrigerator, right? And they said that there was never any problem with the meat. They would put the meat out on the counter and fed hundreds and hundreds of people. and there was an issue. Lamalam and Azman, all these restrictions, all of the Mitzrayim, he had no issue with. And that was to create, in fact, in the 6-Day War, people were running to him and saying there was a lockdown because they were afraid of being bombed. They said, what do you call it, a blackout. You couldn't light any lights in your house because if they're going to see the lights, they're afraid the Egyptians or whatever were going to bomb their houses. So he had his light on in the house, and they came running over to him saying, we're in a blackout. He goes, the planes, he says, all the planes were destroyed. The first day of the 6-Day War, they sent all the planes, and he said, there aren't any planes left. Nobody knew yet what was going on. It wasn't like today with you have instant communication. You didn't know till a week later what was going on. Nasser was still broadcasting for a week that they were winning, right? Which was a great mazel, because that's why Jordan entered the war, because they actually believed Nasser. And that's, of course, why, Baruch Hashem, we were able to get back Yehuda Shamron and Yerushalayim. But if there would have been Lahavdil CNN, then it wouldn't have been any victory like that. So he had a knowledge, he had an awareness, he was above the limitations that we see, and he said the reason why he was because obviously he completely allowed the pulse of his soul to be so strong by negating his physical self. Not something that any of us would do or should even think about. Even in Nachman's time he says don't do this, but they fasted incredible long fasts from week to week, from Motzei Shabbos till Friday night fasts. They learned nonstop all night. They went into mikvahs that were ice cold. They broke every fear, every limitation, and through their tefillos and through their learning, they reached these levels. And it's very, very, and even with that, they had to start out with this very great neshama, and then it's like the genius is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. Right? You can have this brilliant mind, but if you don't apply it with full capacity, you don't get to that. You don't get to that level, as we unfortunately all know. So I think that the presence of the Baba Sali in the early years of Israel, when so many of his landsmen, Maghreb, the Jews of North Africa, were falling into the hands of Mitzrayim. Let's face it, right? They lost their connection to Moshe Avdo. They lost their connection to Torah and mitzvos. That's what Eretz Yisrael was like in the 50s and 60s, right? And I'm not pointing fingers, but that was the Yisurim. I like to put it in a positive sense. The Yisurim with which Klal Yisrael was Kona Eretz Yisrael was to lose so many neshamos to Torah and mitzvos. And he saw his own, his own peoples, the Moroccans and Algerians and Tunisians, all fall to the lowest levels, all fall into the Yad Paro throughout those years. Until, things started to change and people started going back, because we see now, Baruch Hashem, a tremendous resurgence for many, many years, probably since 1967, but especially since 73, and particularly in the communities of the North African communities, right? Sephardic communities that have led the way in terms of returning and Kavod Torah and belief in miracles and Emunah, and I saw a lot of them down there yesterday in Yeshivot. And instead of, they usually do goats and lambs and stuff like that. Today it's modern. They had a grill, a giant grill. So they were doing free grill. You know what I'm saying? But I'm sure that some of them would have liked to bring out the goats and everything else. But I'll make a l'chaim. I promise you that next week we'll go into details about the Rabbi Nachman's 10 levels of song. Okay? Because that requires looking inside the Tehillim, what those 10 levels are and how they can help. And why saying the 10 kapitlach of Rabbi Nachman's Tikkun Klali is so important. You know what the 10 are? I've given you them. If you don't have them, I suggest you take it down and think about saying it every day, because I call it a spiritual antidepressant. It speaks to removing the poison arrows of the neshama, which are all about anxiety and depression and fear and worry and jealousness and all that stuff. So the antidote is there. It's the Kapitel Ted Zion, 16. I'll give you it in English. 16:32, 41:42, 5977. 5977, Nun Tes Ayin Zayin. Tzaddik, which is 90 and 105. Okay. And 137 and 150. So it's 5 pairs. That's why you asked me about 5. 5 pairs of Tehillim. On that, I'm going to wish a l'chaim, and I daven for everybody. So if you want to make a little l'chaim, you're more than welcome to. But we'll end with a wish that we should be zocheh to have the arrows of Paro removed from us, and we should have emunah b'Moshe Avdo, with all of those great inspiring people that we need to connect with, their teachings and their stories and their accomplishments in order to inspire us to have the strength to jump into the water castle, which is the water of Torah, which is the water of Chesed. Let's see many Yeshuos for Am Yisrael. L'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim. It's really not bad. It's Arak, essentially. It's Arak, essentially. But